I think the message right now is that tech is the future of teaching, that tech is the future of education. But who's giving that message? It's coming from companies who see the benefit to getting their product in a classroom. And at the end of the day, that's not about what's good for kids or teachers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screen Less, Play More. I am Cynthia, the founder of ScreenLessPlayMore.com. And I am guessing that most of you are already familiar with my guest today, Emily Cherkin. But if not, you are in for a treat. She is the real originator of this entire arena of helping parents cope with screen time struggles. Emily is a parent and former middle school teacher. She is known as the Screentime Consultant and is leading the fight for a tech-intentional childhood. Emily works with schools, families, government agencies, and advocacy organizations to ensure that the future of education prioritizes play, skills, and relationships over screens, EdTech, and AI. And she wrote one of the best books for families who are struggling with tech called The Screentime Solution. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I definitely want to talk about EdTech and your lawsuit against PowerSchool, but I'd like to start with what we can do at home. Your book, The Screentime Solution, has the subtitle, A Judgment-Free Guide to Building a Tech-Intentional Family. And why do you think it's important that we refrain from judging parents?
I always joke that parenting is the judgiest sport I've ever played.
True.
Because it doesn't matter. From day one, you're being judged about how you diaper, how you feed, how you sleep. And there is that in and of itself is exhausting, but wait until the screen time stuff comes up, because there are definitely people on all ends of the spectrum in terms of I do whatever, my kid can watch as much as they want to, my kid will never even be in the same room as a screen, and it's so easy to slip into that. And the important thing to remember is that it's just, I always say, replacing judgment with curiosity. Why is it that people feel so passionately about this? Why is it that some people are not as concerned about this? And to start there, because we're not going to change anything if we write people off or make assumptions about their choices without really understanding why.
I think that's great. And I think it was so important. You said it a lot during the book. Just, you're not trying to judge people and make them feel bad. I mean, it's already hard enough to be a parent. So, and I hope people don't think I'm being really judgy just even having this podcast. Just, we're trying to give people some tips and some help and some ways to navigate this, because I get it. Everybody's got their moments when they need to use screens, but let's just, like you said, be intentional about it.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's actually my foundational philosophy, the sort of TLDR that I always joke about, is later is better, less is more, and relationship skills before screens. And you have that in your title, less and more. So we're very in alignment on that.
Very cool. So a lot of parents give their kids a phone as a way to get in touch with them after school or during extracurriculars, and they just set up some parental controls and go on their merry way. But why do you feel like parental controls are not sufficient?
Because it's using technology to solve a problem technology created. And I think I have an essay with 10 reasons I don't recommend parental controls. And I say that with a caveat, if people have them and they use them and they work, great. But too often, I think we rely on them as the solution, and they are a tool. They're not the solution. And to go to the example of I want a phone to get in touch with my kid after school. Well, my first question is, why does it have to be an internet-connected smartphone? Yeah. Because a flip phone does that just fine. And if it's really, truly I just need to call or text to find out where my kid is or coordinate. And I would back it up even further and ask, why do they need a phone in the first place? What do we want to think about? What skills are we giving them an opportunity to build by delaying access to that tool? And I would argue there's actually quite a few skills about, self-reliance and advocacy, independence, that are extremely important to raising a healthy child and a thriving adult someday. So I say that my 14-year-old has a flip phone.
Okay.
And she's doing fine. We do share my phone as well, which is always interesting. But she can't take it to school. It doesn't leave the house with her. But if I need to get in touch with her, she's got a flip phone, when she remembers to charge it.
Yeah, really. Well, just a couple of days ago, my kids, who are 10 and 7, wanted to go to the park and kick some soccer balls. And I was actually okay with it, but I just said, where's your watch? How are you going to know what time to get back? And my son couldn't find his watch. And I was sort of like, all right, well, just kind of guess when you're going to come home. And then he was actually the one that was sort of nervous about that. And he said, let's use the walkie-talkies. So
Yeah.
believe it or not, the walkie-talkie, it reached all the way to the park 7 blocks away, and that was totally fine.
We have to remember that in the 80s and 90s, childhood was like that. It wasn't abnormal to send your kids to the park or let them roam around the neighborhood by themselves without being connected. We often didn't know. I mean, certainly my childhood, my parents didn't know where I was some of the days, especially in the summer. But we have to remember that that's still okay and still possible, that a lot of this is about parental anxiety. And to be fair, what are we doing as parents but scrolling 24/7 and getting clickbait, horrible news headlines in our feed and making us feel like the world is a much more dangerous place than it really is? And, many people in this field are saying we're overprotecting kids in the real world and underprotecting them online. And, yes, we should protect kids online, but I would also just don't give them access to online. That's another way to protect them, is by not giving them that exposure in the first place.
Very true.
So, or at least delaying it as long as possible.
And the kids can all get around the parental controls
100%.
Pretty easily.
Every parent I've ever worked with who's come to me has said, well, we tried this and they found the workaround. I mean, I call it digital whack-a-mole. You can block something. The kids, like even in the school, and we can talk about EdTech too, but like the school issued devices. I mean, supposedly there are these surveillance tools and software and filters. Every kid I know is playing video games, watching YouTube, surfing the web, accessing social media platforms through things like Google Docs. I mean,
wow. Yeah.
Because the Google Suite tools are used for the school, right? Like it's available to them and it's connected to the internet. So we just can't separate. I really think we have to see them both as one and the same, that the phones we give our kids are exactly like the devices we're giving them, but just in the name of education, which is problematic for sure.
Well, and then in the book you say, I want to shout this from the rooftops. Parental controls do not monitor in-app content. So once they have whatever it is, Snapchat or TikTok or whatever, they just see what they see, right? I mean,
I was going to say, if these were designed to work, they would work. If the companies wanted to create something that actually protected kids, they could. It's a choice not to, because if they do that, they decrease the amount of time children spend on their platform. And their business model is built entirely on time on device. And so it's counter to their business model. And what I always say is that child development is in direct conflict with their business model, because child development needs less or zero time on these devices. Mm-hmm. And so they're never going to create it in a way that works. And they're always going to blame parents. I think that's a really important thing, that when we even parents blame each other or blame ourselves, the industry has designed it this way. It is designed to be manipulative. It is designed to hook kids' attention. I mean, look at adults. We're terrible about being addicted to our phones. That is by design. That is on purpose. And when we blame parents or ourselves for it, yes, we need to understand the risks. Yes, we need to talk to our kids about it. But the industry loves it when it's parents going after each other. It's when we say, oh, you're a bad parent.
Because if your kid was smoking cigarettes, people aren't going to be like, you're a terrible parent. They got addicted to cigarettes. You're going to be like, oh, cigarettes are terrible.
Yes. Yes. And actually, that's the analogy that I see with the EdTech issue is very akin to the cigarette industry, that we are knowingly giving kids health harming products. In the name of education, but also social media too. And I always think about, we used to smoke on airplanes. We don't smoke on airplanes anymore.
It blows my mind.
Isn't that crazy? But I really hope in 10 years we can have another conversation where can you believe that we used to give kids internet connected devices with ChatGPT on it in 3rd grade?
That'd be kind of funny if we started doing remember restaurants was smoking or non. What if it were are you going to be on your phone or are you going to actually talk? Which section of the restaurant would you like to be in?
Non-phone and phone. Yeah. There has to be some cultural shift here about, some public shaming, so to speak, of adult behavior. I always want to say too, this is not a kid problem. This is an adult problem that is affecting children.
Well, so really you're suggesting, we don't need parental controls. We need parenting, right? You need to let your kids know why this is a problem.
Yeah.
What they could be seeing on there, why that's addictive, and just be explaining all this so that it's not just oh, you can't have the candy. All right, well, then I'm going to put a bag of candy under my bed.
Yeah. And it's hard because you can't, I just said we can't blame parents. I always say it's not parents' fault, but it is our responsibility to address these issues and talk to them about it. And that doesn't mean bad things won't happen. You could do all of the things right. I mean, I know families who don't allow any internet access for their young kids, and then they go to kindergarten and get an iPad, like for schools. We have to have these conversations because we know kids are going to be exposed to it, whether or not we've allowed it or introduced it. I mean, that's if you're an alcoholic who's chosen not, I'm not drinking anymore and I'm going to not have alcohol in my house, you can do that. You can live an adult life and avoid places where there are alcohol. You cannot do that with screens.
Yeah.
I mean, most adults have a screen or multiple screens in their house. So it's a very different, and plus we're talking about children who are experiencing addiction. We're not talking about adults with fully formed brains.
Right.
This is a very different, it's a modern dilemma, a modern problem that we've never really had to deal with before.
Well, so when you have parents that are coming to you for one-on-one training and counseling, are you finding that it's more that the parents are just reluctant to say no? Like they continue to have the problems because they just won't take the devices out of the home because it's so convenient to have the devices?
Yeah, that's part of it. It's a good question. I think I think sometimes parents don't even realize they can say no. I think they feel like this is what everyone's doing, and this is just that new right of childhood. I mean, I do sometimes think people seek me out to help validate that what they're doing is right. Sometimes I have found that over the last couple of years, it's easier sometimes for me to be just more direct and say, you're telling me that this is actually so much harder, that your kid is a totally different person. And when you take it away and when you don't have access, you love the way your family is. So, I mean, I don't need to tell you, you just told me that, right? So, but the problem is it's extremely difficult. And especially the older your child is, we're talking like working parents who, don't have a lot of time with their kids. I mean, it's not easy. And the problem is technology makes our lives easier.
Right.
And sometimes that's great. And sometimes that's terrible.
Right. Yeah. I've personally found that it's really hard to moderate it and constantly be on top of it. So I've just decided to say, like, we're not doing it. Like, I am so sick of having these fights of please turn off the Minecraft, please whatever. And so we have very specific times when they're allowed to do it, which is basically just like Saturday morning. And I'm like, go, have fun. But I prepare myself to know they're still going to fight me, even though it's just Saturday morning. But I'm like, okay, fine. I'm willing to have the fight once a week so that you guys at least experience it a little bit and you can talk about it with your friends at school and whatever. Right. But I just, because of the addictive nature, I can't let them do it for 20 minutes a day because it's every single day you're having the same fight.
Yeah, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like you just... And I think about the destruction of the relationship to you and your child, right? Conflict is normal, but excessive conflict is damaging, And so, again, I think expectations are important, right? Saying like, this is the norm. This is how we do it. This is like Saturday. It's like Saturday morning cartoons, recreating that kind of experience as a weekly thing. But the difference too is that the way games, the way internet-connected apps and social media stuff is designed now is very different than when we were growing up, right? So it is harder. And, I've had no parent has ever come to me and said, I wish I gave my kid the access sooner. Never. Never. Not one parent. And I've talked to thousands of parents over the years. It's always, I wish I'd waited, or I wish I knew then what I know now. And I always say it's worth the fight because when they're younger, you do have more authority. You do have more ability to set limits and, restrict access to some degree. I mean, again, it's not easy at all, but boy, it is so different when your kid turns 6. If your phone is in the bedroom right now, let me just jump right to one of the tips, parents. If your phone's in your bedroom right now and your little kids are little, and they don't necessarily say anything about it, let me tell you, when they're 14 or 16 and they eventually get a device, they're going to say, well, you've had your phone in your room this whole time. Get your phone out of your bedroom. Do not normalize phones being in the bedroom. That is like the lowest hanging fruit. If you want to do one thing, it's change that behavior because it is about modeling. Your kids are noticing. I mean, look at how little toddlers can pick up a phone and savvy swipe it. I mean, they know how to use it. It's so user friendly. The skill part will come, but it's the behavior around how we use it too. Are we pulling it out at the red lights? Are we pulling it out in line at the grocery store?
I've thought of that too, of don't use it while I'm driving because one of these days when I'm saying, here's how to drive, and I'm saying, don't text while you drive, they're going to be like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah, why monkey see, monkey do. I mean, and again, that's that's the, not burden, but that's the well, it is the burden of parenting. It's like they are going to copy us for better or worse. So what do we want them to copy? What do we want them to imitate? What kind of adult do we want them to be? That's the adult we have to be.
And you're saying it's not like everybody needs to go screen free. You're just saying, let's be tech intentional. So
Yes.
what does that mean?
Yeah. So I mentioned my sort of foundational pillars, which is less is more, later is better, relationships and skills before screens. And so, to me, not all screen time is created equal, right? It's very different to hand your 7-year-old TikTok and let them just go wild versus sitting down together as a family and watching a movie. I mean, that's not the same experience at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think family movies are a great way to connect as a family. But let me just also say this, parents, family movie night's one screen, one family.
Yeah.
It is not parents sitting on the couch with their phones while the movie's playing. So
Good point.
again, call it what it is. If it's a family movie night, then everyone's watching the same thing without other distractions. So again, we can help our kids understand that by differentiating that there are different kinds of screen time. One of my favorite strategies is to talk about living your life out loud, which is narrating what you do as you do it around screen time. So the kids start to see how we use it. Like, I'm opening my banking app. I need to find out, where to deposit this check, or I'm, texting your friend to see what time soccer practice is. Living our life out loud around it and narrating it does help us model that screen use in a way that, I think is extremely important as a
I
parent.
think that's such a great idea, because then it's not like, I'm ignoring you right now, I'm on TikTok. It's like, oh, hey, I'm doing a quick grocery list on my Walmart app. And then they realize, oh, you're actually using it as a tool. You're not just trying to entertain yourself while I'm on the swing set. You're really doing some work, which, sometimes you got to do that. Yes, most of the time it'd be nice if you could be present with your kids at the park, but come on, like sometimes you just got to get in that Walmart order so that it can be ready for you in 3 hours when you're done going to the park. So.
Right. And acknowledging, I think it's important too, like we can say to our kids, hey, I know you want my attention right now, and I'm going to give you my full attention in a minute. I have to complete this order, and then I'm putting my phone away in the bag and I'm coming over. Don't try to multitask. Don't try to pull your attention in 2 directions. Our kids know when they're not being listened to, or when we're sort of half watching. Yeah. And again, I'm not in the business of shaming parents here. Look, we could all do better. I don't think anybody is saying I am a perfect user of technology, but also, like, I always say, like, going for that 80-20 rule, like 80% of the time, living and modeling the values we want. We're not always going to do it. And that's actually normal and healthy too, is to model that we screw up as parents as well. Like to say, oh my gosh, I got so distracted by my phone. I said I was going to come play with you. And then 20 minutes later, I got sucked into an Instagram scroll. Like, owning that, saying it's hard for me too. My brain really wanted to keep going and I don't like how I feel about it.
Well, I've noticed I didn't even have Instagram until I started doing this podcast, and absolutely, it sucked me in. I thought, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to post some things about different episodes. And I realized, oh my gosh, I've spent an hour because because of course it starts feeding me all the stuff about screen time and about parenting and about play. And I'm like, this is so interesting. And I'd be like, it's been 90 minutes. So I pointed out to my kids, I said, you guys, this is crazy. And I want to be looking at it and I shouldn't. So I put a 30-minute timer on it. And I'll sometimes point out, hey guys, check it out. My timer went off. I'm done for the day.
Right. And that's so great modeling too. And I think not just about the screen too, but about the skills for like time management, for example, showing your kids that it's okay to treat yourself sometimes to things, right? If that's your version of a treat, right? And then you're going to sort of set that time limit and put a boundary and then like check yourself on it. Those are things that kids need help building those skills. That's executive function. And it's like, that's what childhood is all about, is like learning how to hone and develop those skills that will make them functioning adults.
Just, being able to think for themselves and, like you're saying, decipher what is true and what is not true. Because the reason why school started and why education started in this country was so that we could self-govern. And so we could be informed voters. And so that you wouldn't just believe whatever the king said was true. You need to make your own opinions. And now it's like, guys, don't just believe whatever TikTok says is true. You need to check that out. You need to, and
Totally.
you don't necessarily need to believe what the president is saying is true. Check it out. Do
Yes.
do some
Do
fact
your
checking.
research and not by ChatGPT. I mean, this is the other thing is, I'm a huge advocate for getting phones out of schools, right? The phone free schools movement is absolutely the right thing to be doing. And, some of us have been thinking and talking and researching about this for years. So it's happening. That's great. But how confusing is it for children to be told you can't bring your phone to school, but here's your iPad
Yeah.
for school? Here's
Yeah.
your internet connected device. So that is a mixed message, and rightfully so, children should be asking questions. Now, again, asking questions and giving them up power and autonomy to make decisions is very different. But
Right.
it is ridiculous to me that we are doing that. And I'm not anti-tech. I am tech intentional. Children need technology skills, but technology education is not the same thing as educational technology. They are very different.
Absolutely. Because some of us do whatever we can at home to shield our kids, and then they go off to school and they've got, who knows, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours worth of a screen. And so, I want to talk to you because you've done a lot of work in this space and high profile speaking events about EdTech. But the most important question I have for you about this is, what was it like to meet Hugh Grant?
It was pretty cool. Not gonna lie. Yeah.
So you were at an event hosted by Closed Screens Open Minds, right?
Yes, in
And
London.
so it was like Jonathan Haidt, Hugh Grant, Sophie Winkleman.
Yes. Sophie reached out to me, oh my gosh, over a year and a half ago, I think. And we just started corresponding because a lot of the activism she does in the UK is very similar to what I've been doing. And it was, I sort of joked, she and I are like kindred spirits who are just, the UK, US versions of each other because we're saying so much of the same things. And so we hit it off and we've been talking. And then I just decided to show up at this event, and it was a last minute thing. So actually, I met Hugh and Sophie in the same room. I'd met Sophie online, like we'd talked many times, we've texted, we've emailed, but I'd never met her in person. And so I was really excited to meet her. I'll tell you a little funny story. We walked into the room and there's Hugh Grant and Sophie, and I was like, Sophie, and I reintroduced myself to Hugh because we'd met on a webinar, and then I said, oh, I'm so excited to meet you, Sophie. And then I handed Hugh Grant my phone and I said, we take a picture of me.
That's amazing. He probably loved it because that never happened.
I kind of was thinking it was funny, but he was, he's a gentleman and is very passionate about, this topic too. And it's great.
Really glad, in all honesty, that he's thrown his hat into this because it brings visibility. When Hugh Grant says something, people pay attention. And I really think this is so important because, like we're saying, you do everything you can and then they get to school and they're just inundated with tech and easily inappropriate content, finding stuff on YouTube. It's totally insane. And so, let's pretend that they didn't even have their cell phones, because that's a whole other can of worms.
Exactly.
But let's say a school has already gotten rid of cell phones,
right?
But you still have the Chromebooks and everything. What do you feel right now are probably the top 2 most detrimental things about EdTech?
Oh, that's easy. I mean, just simply the distraction, right? The fractured attention, the inability to stay focused, the impact on learning. And then, the internet. I mean, the internet is a Chromebook is a web browser. It's not a learning tool. And again, the very easy solution to this, which would be an incredibly difficult thing to do, but I think needs to happen, is to remove the internet from the students' devices. And if you're doing that, then why do you each need an individual device? A computer lab absolutely would serve the purpose. But the problem is, and there's this term called, that's not my term, but enmeshment, right? This idea that because so much of educational technology has become embedded in internet-based tools, and within the same company, you have multiple types of tools. So when we say EdTech, people are like, well, what do you mean? And it actually can mean anything from registration systems, student information systems, grade books, online curriculum, email. It covers anything. And so it's a very broad category. And the problem is when you have everything enmeshed in this one company or often multiple companies, to remove one, it disables the entire system. And
Okay.
that's where we are right now. So, for example, AI in schools isn't like some new wave of technology. I mean, it is, but it's not new companies coming in and being like, we're
Right.
just AI. It's companies that are already in schools embedding AI in the tools the schools already
So the
use.
school already owns the app, already pays for the app, but now all of a sudden there's going to be this extra function that is
Yeah.
AI.
And I call it an assault because it's not consensual. It's not like they're going around and asking parents or teachers, to be fair, hey, do you want us to add the AI tool to Canvas or to Gemini, Google's Gemini, the Google Classroom, or, ChatGPT being available. I mean, that's in my district here, is available to children on their devices. And of course, what's happening is that it's not being used for a tool because I would argue it's a totally developmentally inappropriate tool for children, but kids are using it to do their homework because of course they are. It's a homework machine. You gave it to them and then you told them to use it responsibly. But even worse than that, and this is where I get so angry, is like my daughter had 36 kids in her English class. I taught 7th grade English. That's the class she was in last year. 36 kids. The teacher sent home a message about how kids are using ChatGPT to write their papers. The problem is that when she asked for support because she had to grade all these extra papers because she has so many kids in her class, the district's response was to use AI to assess student papers. So to me,
So infuriating.
it is. As a former teacher, I am just outraged by this because the solution isn't give them AI to grade papers. It's give her fewer students, give her more support. Stop giving kids tools that require teachers to go through extra hoops to assess whether it's AI or not. And I am hopeful that there's change coming for that, but I'm so angry.
Well, because the feedback that AI is going to give is just not going to be that helpful. It certainly isn't going to be the same as one-to-one. Like, I vividly remember in 9th grade, we learned how to write a 5-paragraph essay.
Yes.
And I butchered it. I did not understand what he was talking about. And so I was basically going to get an F on it, but he called me in, had office hours with me, and was sort of like, hey, what's going on? And I explained what I thought it was supposed to be. And he's like, no. And he just went through, retaught it to me. That honestly changed my life because I ended up being a writer. And so the fact that he took 10 minutes with me to redirect me and make sure that I understood it really honestly probably changed the course of my life. Because if I had just kept doing crappy essay after crappy essay without any real feedback, I would have been frustrated and been like, I'm not pursuing this. I'm a bad writer,
Yes. Learning happens in the context of relationships. And this is what technologists do not understand. They think we can standardize, measure, assess, report, personalize learning in a technological way. If you remove the human relationship, that's not learning. That's not teaching. That's input, output. That's regurgitative AI, as I like to say, right? Like, it is not school. Or in my opinion, it's not what school should be. And so, the thing that I really want to help parents and teachers understand, and it's very interesting, a lot of resistance I get is from teachers. And I have a tremendous empathy for teachers. And I also want them to know that as they're doubling down on these AI tools, as some of them are, that it isn't AI is training the teachers to be better teachers. The teachers are training AI to be better AI so that they can displace the teachers. The teachers are already being asked to do more than is, I think, humanly reasonable or possible. And teachers are more than just, pouring information into children's brains. Information isn't knowledge. Like, that's another thing technologists get wrong. It's not just how much you know, it's the context in which you know it and how you apply it and how it is relevant to your life and how you make meaning from it. That's what learning is. That's why, kids are not standardized. When we attempt to standardize everything, we lose what the human component of education, teaching, and learning is. And so, to me, that's the direct threat to democracy, right? To go back to what we were saying, like, you raise kids who think that everything is input, output, same. If you do X, you get Y. That is meaningless in a larger context. Being able to think for themselves, being able to speak up or disagree with someone. I think civil discourse is probably one of the most important skills that children
Yeah.
could learn, and that's not happening
Right. It's
at all.
going down the drain. I mean, there was a time when people, Republicans and Democrats in the Senate were best friends with each other. And
Yeah.
it's just
And
really
mutual
changing.
respect, even if they disagreed on topics. Yeah, it was. I agree, and I will say, as cynical and painful as sometimes the news is, this topic in particular, and a lot of the EdTech advocacy work I do is around data privacy, which is often a little bit more behind the scenes stuff. We talk about content a lot, or efficacy, like, is the tool good? But there's a huge elephant in the room, which is the data privacy component, which is the companies are collecting massive amounts of information about children without parental informed consent. And so, I have found that actually that is a cross-party lines, that I have talked to people all over the political spectrum about this topic, and they all care about it in a very similar way. I mean, how they get to it or what their solutions are might be different, but they agree that it's bad. And that is something that gives me a lot of hope, actually.
Yeah, that's good. Well, how can teachers then now in this day and age be tech intentional in their classrooms?
Yeah, and I want to acknowledge right up front that teachers are between a rock and a hard place. A lot of times it is not their idea to deploy, but they have to use these tools. It's expected of them. And another big challenge is that mandated testing, state testing, is on internet-connected devices. So what's happened is, it used to be kids would go to the computer lab and take the test. Now it's like, well, we have to give the kids these internet-connected devices so they can take the test. And then because they have them, we have to justify it. So now we're using internet-based curriculum, right? This is that enmeshment problem. And so, unfortunately, teachers are really in a tricky spot. I think more experienced teachers who might have more power or respect in their schools or districts might maybe get away with a little bit more in terms of refusing to use it, or using it at the bare minimum. But there are also teachers, and I don't want to say it's just younger teachers, but there is a subset of teachers who are very excited about all of what technology can do. And again, I'm not saying it's not interesting or exciting. It's just, if it is out of alignment with children's developmental needs, then we cannot displace that learning stuff in favor of the screen. We can use the tools to supplement, we can introduce, we can teach them about it. But I think it is more common than not that there's a lack of understanding about child development. And I mean this for parents too. I mean, the number of parents who really don't understand child development is pretty high. And I include myself in this as a teacher. I was a teacher for several years before I really understood that children's brains are not adult brains.
Yeah.
And I had a master's degree in education. So, I put that out there because it isn't something that we talk about or common knowledge. And so, I've courage to the teachers who are trying. And, I have a collective, my Tech Intentional Movement for Education collective on my website, where I am trying to bring parents and school leaders and teachers in to ask questions, share resources. I've got lots of templates and downloadable resources. Actually, my next session today is a office hour. So I do live office hours. People can come in and ask questions. I really want to help empower teachers here. And I also think teachers are most often the most disempowered group. And so there's a need then, I see, for parents to really not speak for teachers, but ask teachers, how can I support you? What are the things you need? What kinds of speaking up would help your job be better?
That's really good. Thank you for that, because I'll use that. I would like to think that they could step back and say, okay, do I really need the screen for this? Could I read you guys a book instead of having YouTube read you guys the book? But when I was talking to the administration at my children's school about hey, is there any way we could kind of just pare back the tech a little? The director said, well, we just bought brand new Promethean screens for every classroom. So that would kind of be talking to them out of both sides of our mouths.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is the problem, right? These are administrations or districts or school boards that are making these decisions. That happened here last year. They ripped out all these floor to ceiling whiteboards in one of the high schools that the teachers loved, and they replaced them with digital whiteboards. It doesn't make any sense. And this is the problem, again, where teachers then get caught. And unfortunately, many of them are leaving, the ones who really just can't stand it anymore. And, I don't want to speak for all teachers, but I do think there are some teachers who see students coming in who don't care. There is an apathy about school, about life, meaningful experiences, in part because of how much screens they've had access to at home. So this is a multifaceted problem. And, we need to be really mindful about not going straight at the throats of teachers for this, because oftentimes it's not their decision. And as parents, we have to look at our own parenting decisions that might be impacting our kids' behavior in the classroom, for example, right? If all our kid has ever known is video games or social media feeds and doesn't seem to have interest in anything, and again, not because it's our fault, but because of the design, and we're sending those kids to school and those kids couldn't care less what a teacher says, then I don't blame the teachers for saying, well, that's all they want, so I'm putting up the video screen. Or they have 36 kids and they're supposed to grade papers. If they can have a video read the book so they can grade the papers.
Right.
I mean, again, I get it, but somebody has to start the conversation and say, and I really want to stress too that I see all of the school, not just the teachers, but the administration, the school board, as victims of EdTech. It's not just the teachers. It's not just the students. It's the schools too, because the tech companies are in this for the money. They're not in this to help make kids' lives better or improve teaching. They're here for profit. And this is an unregulated industry that is running wild.
I actually have a question that is directly from one of my listeners named Sally. And she says, how can parents partner with schools to create consistent expectations for screen use at home and at school?
Great question. Again, I'm really a firm believer in collaboration, that this is only going to work through building relationships with people, even if we don't agree, even if they're coming at it from a different angle. So I have a downloadable resource on my website called the Unplug EdTech Toolkit. And in it is several questions that parents can ask teachers or schools. And then I have an expanded version in my membership group that has, questions you can do to follow up with the school administration. When they say X, you say this. Again, at the end of the day, this all comes down to relationships. So my advice to parents is to start with, who do you have at your child's school who's the person you have the best relationship with? And don't be afraid to ask questions. Asking questions in a curious, non-judgmental way is very different than coming in and saying, I can't believe you're giving them so much screen time. Because it may not be their decision. It may not be their choice. So saying I'm concerned about it, or I'd like to understand this better, or, I checked this box that says I consented to a whole bunch of things that I'm not clear on. Can you show me how this is working? Ideally, we would go to the administrators about this, because ultimately it's their, sort of that's the top down. But there are, it gets really complicated too when you have individual teachers who are maybe introducing stuff that's not even going through a formal vetting process. Oh, pull up your phone, or let's open this app, or go to this website. And again, we're giving them internet connected devices. Like it is easy to do that. And I actually think this is going to have to go back to higher ed too. How do we teach teachers? Because I think the message right now is that tech is the future of teaching, that tech is the future of education. But who's giving that message? Coming from, it's coming from industry. It's coming from companies who see the benefit to getting their product in a classroom. And at the end of the day, that's not about what's good for kids or teachers.
Yeah. I'm so glad that people like you are fighting this fight, because I don't want to have to just pull my kids out of school. I don't want to be forced to go to a private school. If it's bad for my kids, it's bad for everybody's kids.
100%. And that's a really important message too, is that we're doing this for all kids. It's not just my kid. I mean, it is. That's where we start, but it's bad for all kids. And we don't want to I believe firmly in public education. I don't want to undermine it. And private schools have their own challenges with this. Some of them are doing a great job because they see that public schools are fleeing, people are fleeing, but I would not paint it with all one brush either. There are some public schools that are doing a much better job than some private schools, and vice versa. If we can affect change in our own backyards first, all politics is local. So it's just starting where you can, asking questions, and going up to the people who have power, who make the decisions, whether that's the school board or the administration. Don't take no for an answer. Don't take, well, we can consent on your behalf. No, that's not okay. And you don't consent, right? It's not informed consent. So yeah, I mean, have courage. This stuff is hard. It's scary. It's confusing. But I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't get out of bed if I didn't believe that this mattered. It would be easy to lose sleep over this. And I do sometimes, but
The other side of the coin of this, we're trying to reduce tech, but we're also trying to bring forward more play, more independence, more responsibility for kids.
Yes.
So the last question I like to ask everybody is, if you're willing to share, what's your favorite memory that you can think of from when you were a kid or a teenager, when you were allowed to do something just by yourself without parents? Nobody was watching you and telling you what to do.
No, I love that. And I think about my childhood all the time because I had an 80s childhood and I lived on a dead-end street. We rode bikes in the street. We played basketball. We played kick the can in the street with all the neighbor kids till the sun went down. There was a neighbor down the street. Everyone knew Diane. Diane would give us ice cream. I would borrow books from her. She had Legos. We would just in and out of her house all day long. And it was like the best. I mean, I felt like my parents trusted me to make good decisions. And I didn't go out of my neighborhood. I was staying on my kind of calm street. But what empowering experiences that was for me to know I could navigate the world, and it wasn't always perfect in terms of growing up and self-confidence and all that. But like I every day am grateful that I had a childhood that allowed for that.
If you'd like to hear more from this interview with Emily Cherkin, head over to Apple and become a subscriber. You'll hear more from Emily about EdTech and her lawsuit against PowerSchool. As a subscriber, you'll get early access to episodes from Screen Less, Play More, bonus materials, and my book bites, where I do a quick synopsis of books that I find really great because I know you don't have time to read an entire book, so I will tell you all about it. Head over to Apple and become a subscriber today. And remember, you can always find more information and articles on screenlessplaymore.com or my Substack, also called Screen Less, Play More. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Emily. So much great info. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.